Another day at work. Well, might as well check my email. Spam, cultist death threats. A reminder for that date at the Luxor with Jim at 2 o'clock. Spam, porn, spam. Oh, Shane made a new video. This is exactly what I need to unwind.
About Palestine for the sake of the superior Jewish race.
Jesus Christ, what the f***?
Quickie shrugged. One thing I am absolutely sick and tired of is non-libertarians throwing Ayn Rand in our face like she's the sole person responsible for our philosophy. Ignoring Murray Rothbard, Lysander Spooner, Frederick Bastiat, Margaret Chase Smith, Gustave de Molinari, Rose Wilder Lane, H.L. Mencken, Albert J. Nock, Robert Lefebvre, Benjamin Tucker. Sure, there are plenty of libertarians who like Ayn Rand. Some of them even became libertarians because of Ayn Rand. But they had to give up massive parts of objectivist philosophy to do it because most of it actually isn't very libertarian. We're talking support of very significant taxation.
No, Rand believed taxation should be voluntary. According to ontheissues.org, in a free society, taxation, or to be exact, payment for governmental services, would be voluntary, since the proper services of a government, the police, the armed forces, the law courts, are demonstrably needed by individual citizens and affect their interests directly. The citizens would and should be willing to pay for such services as they pay for insurance, end quote. All she's saying is it should be voluntary. If you don't want the service, then you shouldn't have to pay for it. If you want it, pay for it. I know someone's gonna pull a "that's an Ayn Rand apologist source" or some other, so actually read the book Virtue of Selfishness. Look in the finance section. Basically, what I quoted is word for word of what she wanted and what's in the text I'm quoting. My source even references that book, so please, if anyone was thinking of typing that, just stop.
Monopoly law enforcement, monopoly military.
Many misconceptions on Rand is that she was for a large military. This is the opposite of what she believes. For example, she opposed the draft with a burning hatred. To quote her, "Of all the statist violations of individual rights in a mixed economy, the military draft is the worst. It negates man's fundamental right to life and establishes the fundamental principle of statism, that a man's life belongs to the state, and the state may claim it by compelling him to sacrifice it in battle. Once that principle is accepted, the rest is a matter of time." Second, she saw the role of government as 3 points. Quote, "The proper functions of government fall into 3 broad categories, all of them involving the issues of physical force in protection of men's rights. The police, to protect men from criminals. The armed services, to protect men from foreign invaders. The courts, to settle disputes among men according to objective law." End quote. Third, she thought the military should only be used for defense. Quote, "In a civilized society, force may be used only in retaliation, only against those who initiate its use. The reasons which make the initiation of force an evil make the retaliatorial use of physical force a moral imperative. If some civilized society renounced the retaliatorial use of force, it would be left helpless, at the mercy of the first thug who decided to be immoral. Such a society would achieve the opposite of its intention. Instead of abolishing evil, it would encourage and reward it." End quote. She saw it as a deterrent against hostile powers in domestic threats, and wanted the military only to be used in that role. Is it a flawed view? Yes. But you can't claim she was for a large interventionist military. She opposed the draft and involvement in overseas affairs. Your claim is demonstrably false. By no means was she an anarchist, but she, at the very least, was a minarchist.
She wanted to wipe out Palestine for the sake of the superior Jewish race.
Wow. Fucking wow. I need a shot of Grey Goose right now. Shane, you are using one of the biggest strawmans I have ever seen. It is larger than Jupiter. You simplified this down to the worst talking point I have ever heard. Rand, in regards to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, thought that out of the two, the Palestinians were the aggressors. According to the Atlas Society, on a quote she said, "The Arabs are one of the least developed cultures. They are typically nomads. Their culture is primitive, and they resent Israel because it is the sole beachhead of modern science and civilization on their continent." Sure, was her view a little prejudiced and a bit racist? Yes, but if you look at the Israelis compared to the Arabs, the Israelis had a more Western view on the world and on law. This in no way means she wanted a reverse Holocaust. The main reason why Arabs despised the Jews goes back to the 1800s. A major problem that Rand appreciated was envy. No doubt many Arabs watched with envy as, starting in the late 1800s, Jews came to Palestine, purchased land, usually of the worst quality because that's all the Arab landlords would sell them, and though their hard work and exercise of reason, they made the desert bloom, and they founded a modern city of Tel Aviv. Rather than saying, "We want to join your marvelous world," most Arabs said, "We want to destroy you." End quote. Another quote from the article explains, quote, "A large portion of those Jews were secular-leaning. They embraced the modern scientific worldview. They favored an open, tolerant society and democratic institutions, and thus, even though the founders of the modern state of Israel sought a multi-ethnic society that guaranteed the liberty of Jew and Arab alike, no matter their professed religion, the culture clash was too deep." The culture clash was the main problem she was focusing on. She did not want Israel to destroy the Arabs, only for the Arabs to stop and try a Western view of ethics and science.
Supported genocide of Native Americans, and
he does have a point on this, and Rand did say, quote, "The Native Americans didn't have any rights to the land, and there was no reason for anyone to grant them rights, which they had not conceived and were not using. What was it if they were fighting for, if they opposed the white man on this continent?" End quote. This was in a speech to the 74 class of West Point, so I will concede to your point.
supported government censorship and IP.
She did support copyright, as she once said in her essay for Objectivist newsletter in 1964, "Patents and copyrights are the legal implementation, the base of all property rights, a man's right to the product of his mind." You are right on that one too.
At least when she wasn't saying crazy stuff like sex and food aren't to be enjoyed, only employed for their biological purpose.
Oh, Shane, shit, 2 in a row. It's not so good, but no cigar. But holy shit, did you just say that? No, Shane, this is false. To quote Of the Living Dead by Ayn Rand, "Sex is a physical capacity, but its exercise is determined by man's mind, by his choice of values, held consciously or subconsciously. To a rational man, sex is an expression of self-esteem, a celebration of himself and existence. To the man who lacks self-esteem, sex is an attempt to fake it, to acquire its momentary illusion." On romantic sex and love, she writes, "Romantic love, in the full sense of the term, is an emotion possible only to the man or woman of unbreached self-esteem. It is his response to his own highest values, in which the person of another, an integrate response of mind and body, of love and sexual desire. Such a man or woman is incapable of experiencing a sexual desire divorced from spiritual values." And one for the road! Sex is one of the most important aspects of a man's life, and therefore must never be approached lightly or casually. A sexual relationship is proper only on the ground of the highest values one can find in a human being. Sex must not be anything other than a response to values, and that is why I consider promiscuity immoral, not because sex is evil, but because sex is too good and important. Sex should involve a serious relationship. Shane, why do I have to do this? Why do you lie? She just said right there that sex should be something serious. It should be something that both parties are involved in and are invested in each other. She never said sex should be enjoyed for its biological purpose. and I could not find the quote on food. Honestly, I think you're just... Why do you have to lie on that?
Wait, wasn't that Big Brother's position in 1984? Rand actually did a very good job laying the intellectual foundation for everything you need to conclude the government is unnecessary and illegitimate. But she still couldn't give up those parts of statist indoctrination that were important to her. It got worse as Rand's movement grew into a cult of personality. Objective came to mean anything Ayn Rand says, which is pretty much the definition of subjectivity. It certainly didn't help that she kept changing her mind on some pretty serious issues. But the fact is, objectivists and even Rand herself were openly hostile to libertarians. Sorry, but if you're an objectivist, then you cannot be a libertarian. And if you're a libertarian, under our core principles, including ones that Rand herself espoused, you cannot be an objectivist.
That's all, folks.